John White here with the Luke 10 community. And this is the first of what I hope will be a series of videos on the topic of why sachet is not enough. So if you've hung around the Luke 10 community for a while, you know we have two basic rhythms of attention. The first one has to do with how we listen to God, connecting with God. The second one, and that's what I want to talk about, is how do we connect on a heart level with ourselves and then with other people. We have a high value for connecting on a heart level, and we have a tool which we call checking in with sachet that we use. Now, I want to emphasize that it's not the only way to connect on a heart level. There are lots of great tools that we could use. This is just one that we found to be particularly valuable. So sachet is an acronym, S-A-S-H-E-T, which stands for 6 emotional words: sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender. And we say you can, when we check in, we say I'm checking in as, and you can pick 1 or 2 or however many you want to of those words. I'm checking in as sad and scared, and here's why, and then I'm in. And so that, in a very simple way, that's how we do that. Now, we estimate maybe a couple of thousand people, maybe 2,000 people have learned these two rhythms over the last 7 years or so. And we've seen some amazing results, just phenomenal. I'm going to focus just on the checking in part. Lots and lots of stories of how this has freed people to connect with their own hearts, has really built families, marriages, house churches. It's been used in lots of contexts. Some people have taken it and used it in secular situations, in schools, with children, somebody recently with a recovery group. So it's an amazingly simple but versatile kind of tool. So whereas a great many people have responded with tremendous enthusiasm with this tool, checking in with sachet, there are some people who have responded with, that doesn't really work very well for me. And to be honest, that's where I was when I first learned this tool. It was like, I have a really hard time identifying what it is that I'm feeling. And so I end up feeling awkward, maybe not safe, a little confused. It wasn't initially a great positive experience for me. And so what I want to do is share with you, again, in a series of videos, some of the reasons why I think that's true for some of us. Perhaps you're like me in this. And today I want to focus on this phrase, that some of us are untrained in the realm of emotions. And I want to tell you a story that occurred when I was in 9th grade. So 9th grade was junior high for me. And one day I was in shop class, Mr. Bandy's shop class. And we were in the process of designing some things. We had a big board and we had a T-square, and we're drawing and designing something or other. I can't remember what. And somehow or other, my T-square fell off the table and it landed on the floor and it broke. The one part broke off of the other part. And I was sort of concerned about that. I didn't want to get blamed for it. I'm not sure what my motive was. But I kind of picked it back up, and Mr. Bandy didn't see what was going on. And I kind of put it together. So it just stayed together, but you couldn't tell that it was broken. And the period was over, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I got out of there, and I had nobody was going to blame me for breaking the T-square. Well, fast forward to the end of the day. We're in the last period, and it's gym class, and we weren't going out and exercising that day. We were in something about health. And so all the boys were in the boys' locker room. I remember this like it was yesterday. It was more than 50 years ago, but this picture is burned into my image. So it's the boys' locker room. A lot of the guys are sitting on benches, facing forward, facing Coach Janakis, who was our coach and our PE teacher and all that. And a number of the guys were standing around the edge because there weren't enough seats. And that's where I was. I was standing around the edge of the locker room, leaning against a locker. Well, we were expecting some lesson on something or other, but Coach Janakis was friends with Mr. Bandy, and Mr. Bandy had told him about the fact that a T-square had been broken. And I think there were some of the boys who were troublesome and unruly, and the coach decided this was a chance to sort of rant or preach a sermon about honesty. Now, I was kind of a good kid. I got good grades and I didn't get into trouble, and I was the manager of the basketball team and a football team, coach who I was. And so anyway, there I am standing there, and he launches into this thing, and he's talking about how he's angry, and he's, I can't believe somebody has done this, and they covered it up, and they didn't admit it, and he just went on and on and on. Well, I'm standing against this locker, and I realize he's talking about me, and I begin to sweat, and my stomach is churning, and I'm shaking, and well, he ends this rant by saying, now, whoever this was, I want you to come up after class, and I want you to man up. I want you to admit that this is something that you've done. And I realize that's me, and I've got to go do that. So class is over, and people are leaving, and I walk up there, and I'm literally shaking in my boots. And I say to him, Coach, I'm the one who broke the T-square. And he looks at me in shock, like I wasn't the one that he was expecting. And he says, it was you? And he says, oh, okay. And that was it. It wasn't a big deal, because he wasn't really expecting that I would be the one. Now, the point of this was, it was so upsetting to me that I can remember more than 50 years later exactly where I was and exactly what I felt like. Something important was going on inside of me. Now, looking back, what do I wish would have happened with my family? I wish that we'd have been a family where at dinner time we did something like checking in with Sachet, that was a rhythm in our family, but it wasn't. We didn't talk about our emotions. It just wasn't something that we did. Ideally, I could have looked forward to doing that with my family. We'd gone around the table checking in, and I would have tried to describe what had happened to me that day. Ideally, I could picture my parents listening well and drawing me out, creating a safe environment where I could be honest about what I was feeling. I could picture them maybe asking the question, when are times that others of us around the table have felt that sense of shame or that fear, had that same kind of physical reaction to something like that? And maybe they could have shared their own experiences. And I would have felt like, oh, somebody else understands, somebody else gets what I was going through. I could picture a really fruitful discussion about the topic of shame, the difference between healthy shame and toxic shame. Healthy shame being where I did something wrong and I feel ashamed about that. Toxic shame being where I come to a conclusion that I am wrong, that I am fundamentally bad, and the difference between the two. And how do you handle shame, and what do you do with it? Could have been an amazing teachable moment, but it wasn't. I don't think my parents had any idea how to do that. It hadn't happened in their family growing up, and it didn't happen in our family. And so I and my two sisters, I suspect, learned basically how not to pay attention to our heart, not to pay attention to emotions, not to learn how to identify and name the feelings that we were having inside. Now, we learned other things. We were trained in other ways. We were trained in how to be polite, say thank you for that ride, yes ma'am, no ma'am, all those kinds of things. We were trained to be responsible. Those were good things. I learned how to get up on my own and get to school on time and get my homework done. And there were a lot of good things that I was trained in, but I was untrained when it came to the whole topic of my heart and of emotions. Well, looking back on that, I realized that lack of training had a lot of negative ramifications in my life over the years. I think it was a source that probably led to depression, a lot of emotions bottled up inside of me that I didn't know what to do with or even identify. I learned how to kind of avoid all of that. And I even came to the place, if you'd known me when I was in my 20s or 30s, of assuming that I really was just basically an unemotional person. I didn't have emotions. Now, I know that now that I did, I just was totally out of touch with them. It had implications with relationships, because it's difficult to really connect with people if your heart's not involved. So there are a lot of negative consequences of that, and it wasn't until much later in my life that I began to learn how, slowly, painfully, to identify what was going on inside of me. So when somebody first taught me how to check in using Sachet, I was still at a place of this, I don't know what I'm feeling. And little by little, often awkward, often confused. I've grown in that to some degree, but I'm still on the journey. So my question is that true for you? Is it possible that you were untrained when it came to the topic of your heart and your emotions? And does that affect the whole issue of sachet for you? And that's why simply learning the basic ideas of sachet is not enough. There's more to it than that. So I have a couple of suggestions that you might do in your family, you might do with your CO2 partner, you might do in your house church. The first one is to have a conversation about what it was like growing up in your family. What did your family do with emotions or not do with emotions? That's the first question. What do you remember about that? Did your parents model how to handle emotions in a healthy kind of a way or not? Did they draw them out of you? Did they help you identify what you were feeling? That's the first question. Second question is, how has that impacted you, either positively or negatively? If you felt like you were well-trained or not well-trained, what implications has that had in your life growing up? And then third, what do you think you need at this point to begin to make some progress in this area, to learn how to name your emotions and to share them in an appropriate kind of a way? What's your sense of next steps on how to do those things? So give that some thought. Again, share it with your house church, with your family, see what kind of conversations come out of that. I suspect we might find there are more people than we know who identify with this idea of being untrained. So lastly, I would encourage you on this on the blog site to share your experiences, your thoughts about how sachet has been helpful to you, or on the other hand, how's it been difficult? We want to be a community of practice where everybody here is teaching and everybody is learning. I just want to get that conversation started. So I have some more thoughts on this, more videos to come, but this is a starting place on why sachet by itself may not be enough if we come from a family that's resulted in us being untrained when it comes to matters of the heart.